Yes. There it is, folks. That was the Licorice Alive, meeting me, courtesy of my iReal B, and that was none other than Horace Silver's Song for My Father. That was released in 1963, and Song for My Father is probably Horace Silver's most famous tune, an iconic jam sesh standard, and there was, my little live version of it. For the purposes of this podcast, Horace Silver was one of the great hard bop composers. Silver was a founding member with Art Blakey of the fabled Jazz Messengers. And if you want to explore the hard bop sound, which sort of flowed out of the bebop sound, which kind of emerged out of the previous decade, my recommendation would be to start with the Jazz Messengers, and my favorite album, I think, would be Live at Cafe Bohemia, Parts 1 and 2. Catch up to that if you want to know a little bit more about hard bop. Anyway, hello. My breath is subsiding. I have finally procured enough silence here in the Wood of the Holly to begin episode 22 of Rebel Without Applause. Victor on the leaf blower finally agreed to take a break, and my dear friend Chris below agreed to turn down his music for the short interval I need to create this podcast, coming to you live from my movie studio apartment right here in the heart of the Holly. I'm trying to break it down for you folks, jazz-wise, truth-wise, laughter-wise, and maybe with a little history sprinkled in. So, Thanksgiving. It's here, or we're at Thanksgiving Eve, one of my fave holidays, which I like to lovingly refer to as the 5 F's: family, friends, food, and fucking football. Oddly enough, though, the holiday was made official long before the first touchdown was ever scored. It was proclaimed by none other than Abraham Lincoln in 1863 during the American Civil War, just a few months after the battlefield victories at Gettysburg in Pennsylvania and Vicksburg in Mississippi, which did indeed turn the tide of that conflict. And like so many of our holidays, the 5 F's compels us to commemorate an old story. And like all stories, it has two very different sides. For us white folks, we honor those brave ancestors, those plucky Puritans who about 500 years ago sailed to the New World to escape religious tyranny in Eurodorkia, or Europe, so that they could have the freedom to tyrannize folks over here. And the other side of the story is for the native people whose ancestors came here near the end of the last ice age, and they cursed themselves every Thanksgiving for giving those starving Puritans the turkey and the corn and the sweet potatoes. We should have just let those dumb shits starve, and then maybe they wouldn't have taken our land, denuded our forests, and did that whole genocide deal. Actually, and this is true, in any number of New World native languages, the holiday Thanksgiving, loosely translated, means no good deed goes unpunished. Still, not much I can do about that this weekend, so I'm just going to serve turkey and corn and sweet potatoes to the destitute, the homeless, and forgotten over at the Laugh Factory Comedy Club on Sunset Boulevard, where sadly for me, I haven't not had a gig in over a year. Okay, that's off my chest. Well, it has been a very trying week on my side. My dear old dad, he got blindsided somewhere above the 35-yard line almost 2 weeks ago at the USC Cal game. Now, my dad and my wonderful stepmom, Holly, they are diehard SC fanatics. They pretty much go to every home game, and they usually take a trip to South Bend or Stanford to catch SC in one of those obnoxious intersectional national television games. As for myself, well, I'm really not too into all that sis boom ba stuff, unless on occasion my alma mater, that being UC Berkeley, is in town, which they were that Saturday night, about 10 days ago. Now, the good news was that somehow Cal won, which they hadn't done against USC at the Coliseum in since the last Ice Age or 16 years. And if you're an SC diehard, it was even better news because losing to Berkeley will probably get Coach Helton fired, especially since he just got thrashed by UCLA and Notre Dame is waiting in the wings to do the same. After that, it's nice knowing you, Clay. Adios, fight on, dude. Actually, I have to admit this. I really hate that SC mantra, fight on. Why do we always have to keep fighting? Why not, negotiate forward, or let's find common ground, or peace through justice, or maybe even satyagraha. And if you don't know what satyagraha means, check out my last podcast, Indian Lawyer Dude. It's all in there. And if you ask me, and nobody did, they should really just get rid of that Tommy Trojan dude on the horse with the sword and make their mascot that dark-skinned guy in the loincloth. Gandhi. Would that be cool or what? I mean, that would turn the program around for sure. But it would be expensive because they'd have to reprint all those banners and hats and T-shirts and get a new statue on campus for UCLA students to desecrate. So for the time being, I guess the SC faithful will just have to keep on fighting and, fighting on. But all of that is way beside the point. Anyway, my dad is at the SC Cal game with his usual crew, that being Holly, my stepmom, Mindy, his adopted daughter and best friend, and HK, that being my dad, is doing what he normally does, cussing out the coaches, bemoaning this idiot play and that terrible quarterback. See, I hate to admit this, but my dad is a sufferer of a disease for which there is no cure, sometimes referred to as TDS or LDS or DDS, and that stands for Trojan Doomsday Syndrome or Laker Doomsday Syndrome or Dodger Doomsday Syndrome. Clinically speaking, this syndrome or disease manifests itself as follows. The better a team is doing on the field, the more desperate and angry the sufferer's attitude becomes. Now, as of right now, there is no cure for TDS or LDS or DDS. And frankly, I'm just grateful that he doesn't have RDS, and that's Rams Doomsday Syndrome, because right now the Rams are 10-1 and look indestructible. And if anybody saw that Monday night game like I did, holy shit, they look great. Anyway, my hope is that research will continue, and someday, perhaps not in my lifetime, a cure for Trojan Doomsday Syndrome will be found. Or better yet, maybe for SC fans, maybe Pete Carroll will come back and restore the magic, or if Pete won't, maybe John McKay will reincarnate himself and show up on the sidelines. Anyway, I'm wandering again. Back to that Cal SC game. Anyway, sometime after halftime, my dad starts feeling pain in his stomach. At first, he thinks it's indigestion from that foot-long Polish sausage he ate with all the onions and relish on top, or since SC was leading at the time, it could have very well been an acute attack of TDS, or maybe some combination of both. After all, who knows? He's only 86 years old. So my dad, that being HK, or known to his even more select friends as the Big H, he goes to the bathroom, and now he's sweating bullets. He staggers out of the bathroom, and somehow, with the help of Holly, gets to an aid station, and next thing he knows, he's in an ambulance with Holly, and with sirens blaring, is on his way downtown to Good Sam, otherwise known as Good Samaritan Hospital. Sometime around 1:30 a.m., I get a text from my stepmother, and I dash out of my movie studio apartment right here in the heart of the Holly under the sign to meet HK at Good Sam, which, it so happens, is right across the street from that iconic steakhouse, the Pacific Dining Car, where generations of Kalmansons like myself, starting with my granddaddy Ben Kalmanson, have gorged themselves on their sumptuous signature piece of aged beef known as the baseball steak. Oh my God, is that good? Especially medium rare and garnished with their homemade relish and the creamed spinach on the side. But yes, I'm rambling. That is way beside the point. So I burst into the Good Sam ER. The homeless and destitute and all manner of inner-city Saturday night casualties are splayed out on gurneys, roller beds, and wheelchairs, which are parked helter-skelter in rooms and hallways. Overworked orderlies and nurses dash this way and that. All the while, a pair of cool-headed lady docs were doing their damnedest to keep all those hearts beating. My dad is IV'd up and lying on a stretcher by the control desk, and he is writhing in pain. And it turns out a CT scan revealed that the HK was not suffering from an acute attack of Trojan doomsday syndrome, nor was it that foot-long Polish dog. Instead, the CT scan revealed that HK had suffered some kind of leak or rupture at the site of an earlier operation he had 7 years ago to repair an aortic aneurysm near his abdomen, what the doctors lovingly referred to as a AAA. Well, the big H was spilling blood fast, but of course you couldn't see it because all the trouble was going on inside. And the ER docs were scrambling to get a surgery team together, but none were available at 3 a.m. Saturday night at the Good Sam in downtown Los Angeles. Who knows, maybe they were at the football game. I certainly don't have a clue, but either way, the clock was ticking, the blood was leaking, and as they say in Texas, this was nut-cutting time. Fortunately, Holly, my able stepmother, was able to get in touch with my dad's very able internist, one Dr. Yang, who it so happened was up in Lake Arrowhead. And from his perch atop the San Bernardino Mountains, Dr. Yang put together a crack vascular team at Cedars-Sinai Hospital. An ambulance was procured, but now we were waiting for a transit nurse to accompany that ambulance, and he was speeding his way from West Covina or East Covina, anyway, somewhere in Covina land. Finally, he arrives. The papers are signed. HK gets lifted onto a new gurney, and he is whisked cross town over to Cedars, where he was wheeled straight into the surgical grip of one Dr. Gupta and his top-flight team of vascular surgeons. For myself and family, all we could do was wait and pray for the best. Finally, around 6 a.m., Dr. Gupta came out of the surgical suite and told us that they were able to insert a pair of stents and stop the bleeding. And a stent it's like a tube that stretches or unfolds itself inside the artery and offers a repatch, sort of, so to speak, from inside. And that's inserted from the groin area up through the abdomen area into this area that was bleeding. And we were told that my dad was resting not very comfortably in the ICU, where he rested not so very comfortably for the better part of the last week. Meanwhile, Holly and best friend Mindy morphed from SC football fans into 24-hour bedside advocates. My super sis of the soul, Casey, arrives with her crystals and sage, making sure the spirit world is properly aligned in HK's favor. And even my other super sis of the soul, Cindy, braves fire and smoke and comes down from Ojai with a bag full of organic vegetables fresh from her GMO-free garden. And then there's my dad's rehab pal, Boston's very own Johnny the P. I love this dude, who was there every day for moral support and maybe even mafia protection, I'm not sure. While my brother and myself, we try and keep my dad's spirits up with talk of business and sports. Jim does the business, I do the sports, and I'm extra careful not to say anything that could trigger a bout of TDS. Anyway, it turns out HK breaks all records for family visitations at the Cedars-Sinai ICU, but HK doesn't know that. For my dad, it's just touch and go. Good news is that with each passing day, it's been a bit less touch and a little more go. The big H has shown steady, if ever so incremental improvement, and finally, as of this blurbing, his core bodily functions seem to have stabilized. He made the move out of ICU to a regular room somewhere inside the Pentagon-sized complex that is Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and I hope, he will be released today. According to the team of docs, that being the vascular surgeon Dr. Gupta, and the internist Dr. Yang, and the heart surgeon Dr. Nori, and the patron of the ICU, one Dr. Delgadillo, my dad has just gotten a new lease on life. Lucky him, lucky us. My only complaint is, why does it always have to be a lease? I really wish they'd offer some kind of a purchase plan, or at the very least, a lease to buy option. Anyway, my dad gets this new lease, but he ain't out of the woods yet, even though he is now, as of today, out of Cedars. And there's a pun in there if you can find it. Still, two thoughts seem to dominate my brain on the eve of this Thanksgiving. Thank God for ACE students, and thank God for immigrants, because those are the folks that plugged his leak and saved his ass. A Chinese internist, an Indian vascular surgeon, an Iranian heart doctor, and a team of nurses and helpers for every corner of what the billionaire brat boy, that being the PVP, Putin's vice president, you know who I'm talking about, that being the area of the world that he lovingly refers to as those shithole countries, or what I lovingly refer to as Shitolia, or San Shitolador, or Shitolistan. Anyway, all these folks from every corner of Shitolistan of our great globe, somehow these people came together over the last week to save my dad's very privileged native-born ass. So please, folks, remember this, that all those tired and poor and hungry, those unfortunate huddled masses, those folks that give a hell of a lot more than they ever take. That's right, they do. They give a hell of a lot more than they ever take. And what's more, let's show a little more respect for those lovable nerds, those straight A students who never scored the hot chicks in high school. Well, neither did I, for that matter, and I was a B-plus student. But you get my point. I'm talking about those goody two-shoes who don't play sports and never went to parties or took ski vacations or learned how to surf. Why? Because they were spending too much time cracking books and memorizing flashcards and pulling all-nighters so that they could ace a test and get into a great college and then a good med school, and then for their labors be in debt for a couple of $100K. We all should just be kissing their ass because, well, they're the ones that are likely to save your ass when it's nut-cutting time or heart-cutting time, or in my dad's case, stent inserting time. So put that in your little single-payer e-pipe and smoke it. But whatever you do, don't inhale, because it's really bad for your lungs. Happy Thanksgiving. And thanks for hanging with me. What can I say? If you dug this, please share it with a friend. And if you didn't, well, please don't tell anybody, especially a Saudi prince. And if you want to hear me live, in person, cracking the jokes, breaking it down laughter-wise, call your local comedy club. And as for me, that's right, Bill Kalmanson, the Rebel Without Applause. If you're here in L.A., call the Laugh Factory. Maybe they'll book me. Until then,